I'm a clinical psychologist, and I'm a clinical professor of psychiatry at a medical school, and I work with clients, and I work with all that I've been taught, which is to delve into what has gone wrong, say in the past, that is causing this. But I have this wonderful difference. I can use EFT. It's not enough, we've found now, to bring up the past or to bring up the problem. You've got to be able to neutralize it too. EFT does that. And this is why it's revolutionizing our treatment as psychologists, as psychiatrists. It's doing what we've always wanted to do, is to not just have the person go through the pain of thinking of it again, but have it be neutralized this time. They go through it tapping, then it's removing it. Very incredible. It absolutely changed my whole practice, my whole approach, and I'm not the only one. We're all feeling this. Well, I heard about EFT before there was an EFT, actually. What happened was uh, I had been in, meditation and things like that for years. And a friend called me in New Jersey here, and he said on the phone, this was in 1987, I guess. He called me and he said, Pat, there is something you have to listen to, and you have to pay attention to and read about. And it is a technique based on acupuncture. And I said, okay, I'll do it. I knew I liked him, and I trusted him, this particular person. So I said, well, what do I do? And he said, well, you buy a book. And he named the book, and the book talked about how you could cure phobia in 5 minutes. And I said, well, I'll buy it, but it isn't my type of thing. I don't think you can do that. So I bought the book, and I kept it on the shelf for a year. I didn't look at it because I don't want to be told that you could do something that I knew you couldn't as a psychologist. So I waited and I waited, and then about a year later I picked it up, and I always try things on myself first. I just want to be a guinea pig and see if it works with me. And then I found immediately that it did. I can't remember. I was trying to think today. I can't remember what the different things I used it on. I just tried it on about 5 or 6 different things, issues of my own. It worked. Then I tried it on clients, and it was fabulous. And I knew right then that we had a breakthrough, that this is going to be something very new. But I didn't I didn't use it. It was originally Roger Callahan's that I learned. But I soon got the idea, why do you have to diagnose with all this muscle testing and everything? It's got to be a simpler way. If you have to hit certain acupressure points, why not hit them all and just cover the waterfront? And Gary Craig was, I didn't know him, he didn't know me. It was in the air, I think. It was just waiting to be discovered. Gary was thinking exactly the same thing. He developed EFT. Gary is an engineer, Stanford engineer, and a personal performance coach, and just plain talented. I mean, just a wonderful therapist, although he's not a trained therapist. It's interesting. So he developed this and put in some wonderful things in it. And when I found his method in 1995, I think it was, I just went with his because he had the same idea I did. Simplify it. Make it so that anybody can use it. One of the great things about EFT, and I cannot emphasize this enough, it is there for all of us. It's there all the time. It is not, I use it as a psychologist. I use it in my treatment, of course, with patients. But the most use of EFT really is just for little things that people use every day that is changing their lives by doing that. I mean, this woman told me this week that she has been afraid of going on a highway ever since she had an accident about 5 years ago on a major highway. So now as she approaches the highway, what she does is she simply says, I pull off the road, I tap down my anxiety, and I'm fine. I get back in the car, wonderfully easy, I ride on that road. Other people use it all the time, a dentist's office, doctor's office. They're waiting. I'm sure there'll be a day when we have doctors and dentists and hospitals having closed-circuit TV where they teach people EFT, and they're tapping while they're waiting. Anxiety comes way down. And it is just people on planes use it now. A surprising number. I got on a plane the other day, and 2 different people were tapping in that one plane. I couldn't believe it. It was very exciting. And we've just done a survey on my website on the use of EFT for jet lag. Very, very successful. We had one woman who was for 32 years has been a flight attendant, and she said she never had a flight without some jet lag. None once she started to use EFT in the way that, you know, she was instructed to do. So it's, EFT is, I consider it the people's method. It's there for all of us, and literally at our fingertips. So. Ordinary, everyday, but critical uses of EFT. Before an event, it's wonderful. I mean, if you're anticipating something that's going to worry you, that you don't think you may do well at, like an interview, you know, or a job interview or examination. It's wonderful before exams. You tap down the anxiety, and the difference is incredible. I know of some teachers now who are using it with their pupils before they hand out the exam papers. They have them tap, and they are getting better grade point averages for the class. So you can see what education's going to do with this. I mean, it's just going to, it can take off. It is such, it's so easy to have this to give to other people. I was using it the other day with a tech support person who was on the other end of the phone. And he was helping me with tech support, and he was very good when he announced to me that he thought he might have to get off the phone because he had such a terrible wisdom tooth pain. It was just, he said it's unbelievable, it's so bad. And I said, well, you know, I'm an expert in stress management. Would you like me to tell you something that might be useful to you? He said, I'd take anything. So I taught him very simply the tapping points, and I had him say the phrase. And after one round, I asked him how he felt, and he said, you know, it's funny, but it does feel better. So I said, well, let's do another round just for good measure. And we did another round, and then he said, this is awesome. He said, this is awesome. I hardly feel it. I said, well, we'll do one more round just to clear it, and then we'll go back to my problem. So we did one more round, and then he said he felt much better, and we finished off, and he was a very good tech support person, so we got the problem solved. And then before he got off the phone, I just had to know, so I said, tell me about the wisdom tooth pain now. And there was this long silence, and then he said, you know, I tell you the truth, I'd forgotten about it. It's a typical thing that happens with EFT. It takes the thing away, and people will forget that they were in distress because it's just sort of magically gone. It seems magic. So it is for everybody, just everybody and everything. So all I did was, I said to him, just repeat after me. Even though I have this pain in my wisdom tooth, and I use the I choose, which is a variation, very nice variation of EFT, and I said, I choose to have my tooth and jaw feel comfortable and normal. I choose to have my teeth and jaw feel comfortable and normal. And just keep tapping, saying that, and he did. He was fine with it. He didn't even challenge me. He was in so much pain, I think he thought if I could do anything, it would be good. But he didn't expect that. I find they are, if you don't make a big speech to them and tell them that this is something very new and very special or anything, if you just say, look, try it. It's the whole idea, try it on anything, everything. And they'll do that. Also, it doesn't make any difference whether you're skeptical. You can be a skeptic. I tell them, they say, well, you know, I don't believe it. And I say, you don't have to. If it's going to work for you, it'll work. There's about 2 or 3% of the people that will ever try it that doesn't work for, and if you're one of them, that's it. But the odds are in your favor. Well, the original setup statement, it came from Roger Callahan, then it was refined by Gary Craig, who Gary's brought so much to the whole method. And that was, even though I have this problem, I deeply and completely accept myself. Now that has a value, a real value, in that people get on their own backs because they have the problem. They stop blaming themselves. So that this original statement, which I call the default self-acceptance statement, is very useful to get people off their own backs, to relax them about the whole thing, and everything works better then. On the other hand, there are a number of situations where it doesn't really apply. According to somebody who doesn't know EFT, they think, it's a little strange, why should I accept myself because I have a pain in my toe or something? And some people find it hard to say the words, I accept myself. You know, they don't accept themselves, and it's hard. So I developed a method called the choices method, which zeroes in right on the outcome the person wants and allows them to put that into the EFT, and it works so well. It is like this: even though I'm going to interview for that job next Tuesday, I choose to be calm and confident. And for a lot of people, calm and confident is even easier to think of than I deeply and completely accept myself. Doesn't make any difference, both of them will work, but the choices method allows people to select exactly what they want and put that into the EFT. So it's used very widely now by therapists all over the world. Roger Callahan, it was a very important psychologist working with anxiety. He had a lot of anxiety himself from early life, and you know, a lot of us do. We have these we go often towards techniques that are helpful to us and to our particular type of patient. So he was working with all kinds of anxiety reduction, and he had a patient called Mary. He'd been working with Mary for 2 or 3 years to get rid of an incredible fear of water. She was so afraid of water that she could not get in a bathtub. And she could use a shower, but if she was immersed in a bathtub, she'd get a panic attack. Roger had a pool. He was in California, and he had a pool on out on his lawn. And when she'd see that, she'd become very anxious. She couldn't walk near it. And they did everything, you know, all the old-fashioned things. I call them old-fashioned. They really aren't. You know, behavior modification, all kinds of things to try to bring down that terrible fear of water. And they'd gotten a little ways with it. And one day she was sitting in his office, and she said she had trouble with her stomach. Roger had been studying acupuncture and acupressure, and he didn't think it was going to affect her fear of water. He just thought it might help her stomach. So he said, well, would you tap under your eye for a while? That's the stomach meridian, and I think it may help you. So she tapped under her eye, and she said, it's gone. And he said, what? What's gone? He thought it was the stomach trouble. She said, my fear of water. It just went away. And she said, and she got up and she walked out. They were on the ground floor, so she could walk out these open doors. And she started running down towards his swimming pool, and Roger was very nervous because he knew she couldn't swim. She'd never been in water, you know, deep water. So he followed her, and she got to the edge of the pool. She stopped. He said, "Just stop." And she stopped, and she put her foot in it, her toe in it. And she said, "I'm not afraid." And the upshot of that is that she went home. She never had a fear of water again. It was a 1-minute marvel, you know, a 1-minute wonder. Well, he thought, this is incredible. I'm going to try it with other people with phobias. He did, and it developed into a totally new technology, totally new. However, Roger had people, he thought that you only use certain acupuncture points for certain issues and certain types of phobias. So he would test people to find out which points to use. You know, he'd do muscle testing. And it was a cumbersome method. And then Gary Craig, who was just about his star pupil. Gary, of course, as I said, is a Stanford-trained engineer and a personal performance coach, and Gary just happened to be brilliant at this. And he got the idea, why do we have to test, why do we have to have certain acupoints for certain things? Why not just tap on all the acupoints in a certain area around the head and upper body and cover the waterfront, and you'll hit the right one, you know, if you do them all. So EFT was developed from that, and it was very similar to a method that I had been using called AccuTap, which I had created for the same reason. I didn't know Gary, and he didn't know me. And then I converted over to Gary's method because he had some wonderful, wonderful developments of it. I thought they were excellent. But it's a whole line of descendants from acupuncture to acupressure to Roger Callahan to Gary and to all of us and to everybody that uses it. Gary introduced the reminder phrase. Roger Callahan didn't really, he had them say something before they began tapping, but he didn't have them say a reminder phrase at each spot. Gary did. And I hadn't either had them say that in my AccuTap, my little method. So I thought that was very impressive, and it was. It really was an innovation, very important. Gary is such a fine communicator that he was able to start a list of, it was an email list that was just incredibly popular and grew and grew and grew, and now, of course, it's enormous. But now it's really a newsletter. It was a list with exchange from people, and all of us began to know each other through that list. And the people who are real stars in EFT today were started on that list. It's really just starting. That's my excitement, really, is thinking about what it's going to be. It's going to do something very fascinating in medicine and in psychology, too. It's going to, I can see EFT being used at the scene of an accident. I can see paramedics all learning it, using it immediately in order to avoid shock. I can see them using it with the terrified accident victim in the ambulance. I can see the people at the emergency room will be trained in it. We'll start using EFT when the person arrives there, and if they're only semi-conscious, they can use it. They don't have them repeating the statements, but they say the statements for them, and they will be tapping on them. And you will also see in emergency rooms, those people who are so frightened waiting will be taught EFT, and maybe there'll be a practitioner or a nurse will come and lead them through it, or they'll have closed-circuit TV showing them. So that in medicine it's going to make a tremendous change because they will use it as a first line of defense before more invasive things. It's going to be used in education. it's going to be used in but it is now being used. Well, let me go back. It's now being used for behavior problems in schools. Counselors are using it and getting effects with really difficult children that they could not get before. They're able to tap, they're interested, they do it, and it calms them, and they're getting some wonderful effects. Yes, in education you'll have the teachers using it. You will have classrooms tapping. You will have children helping each other learn EFT. One of the exciting things with children is how they love to do EFT with each other and help each other. It just seems to be a total instinct. And a story I love was about an 18-month-old whose mother used EFT to stop her teething problem. She had and they cleared it up. They cleared up the teething. And the child, you know, knew what the tapping was and that it was a good thing. I mean, I don't suppose she put it in words, but she knew it was good. And a little boy came over, same age, 18 months old, to play with her. And when the little boy had to give up one of his toys to this little girl, he went into this terrible, miserable crying fit. And the little child, the 18-month-old, reached over and just began tapping him on top of the head. And he calmed down. He just calmed down. Oh, Tappy Bear was developed by Till Schilling, who, well, actually, his daughter. Okay. His daughter created it. His daughter was knew EFT and was babysitting and trying to help a little boy with a problem, and that she was babysitting with, and she sewed little buttons. These aren't the buttons she sewed. This is a manufactured bear, but she sewed EFT buttons where the EFT spots were, and then she told the little boy, now find the spots and tap on them. And he did, and it was incredibly effective. So her father, Till, worked with her to design a bear that would be able to look at you right straight with their eyes forward. You know, teddy bears' eyes go like that, but this one really looks, although the children just love it. There's a hospital in Mexico where a practitioner by the name of Deborah Miller is using Tappy Bears for children in a leukemia ward in the hills of Mexico. And these children love working with the bear, and they love learning to do it on themselves, and she teaches their parents EFT as well. The hospital is so pleased because the children can take injections or give blood or have chemo and not have the same effects that they had before. Really outstanding effects, and they're doing a study. They're starting a study now to see what will happen with the use of EFT with children and their parents. And I think it's, they think, the medical staff says it's remarkable. So that's the kind of thing you're going to see. Another area where EFT is going to be very important is crisis intervention. It can be used with populations after a disaster and do so much to prevent the post-traumatic stress disorder. We used it, a group of psychologists and myself, in 9/11 after the attack, and we went to New York and used it with a number of people who were survivors of that attack and some of the people in the rescue squads. We were not official at that point because the Red Cross and so forth didn't know of us, so we had to do it in a different way. But it was the most effective thing that was given to those people, because it straightened out the terrible, massive disruption of their energy systems, and they were able to actually quiet down and take a look at what had happened without the terror, without the confusion. And it will be used in all kinds of crisis intervention. It's being used now in some homes for battered women and they come there in a state of great distress, and it does it, you know, and it can be used right on the spot. So it's also going to be used, in addition to children, I've already mentioned, it's going to be used a lot for animals. It is so wonderful for animals. It's one of the most inspiring uses of EFT there is its effect on animals. With the owners can either be touching the acupoints very lightly, because they don't want to do big heavy tapping, or they can be actually tapping on themselves and holding the animal or touching the animal. And something of calm and balancing is conveyed that way. I've used it that way myself with a kitten who was really very distressed, and he calmed down so quickly. And he had been traumatized by an unfortunate vet who frightened him very much. And I think it saved his character, because he was this plucky little fella, but he had almost lost all his courage because of this injection that was not handled well, let's put it that way, by this veterinarian, this particular one, who we never went back to, by the way. And by just holding him and quietly touching those points and saying the words, you say the words to the animal, like, even though that man scared me and hurt me, I know that Pat loves me. I'm Pat, his owner. And he calmed down, and he went back to being his plucky little self. It was wonderful. But that's just one tiny example of the way it's used with animals. The energy system, the meridian energy system, is the best way for people to understand it really is to say that you know that there is a nervous system, and you know there's a circulatory system where the blood flows. There is apparently a system in the body or right around the body where energy flows through certain channels. The interesting thing is we cannot see them, but we can indirectly measure that. Now, for example, I read just recently about a study where there was done on the electrical impulses that can be measured, electrical resistance of the skin actually, that can be measured at acupuncture points versus non-acupuncture points. They measured an average of 10,000 ohms, that's OHMS, that's an electrical measurement, for the acupuncture points, the end points of acupuncture. And the surrounding skin was 3 million, so much higher. It's incredible. I mean, it's just astronomical difference. We can measure those things now, but it's nothing to what we'll be able to measure when they have the technology to actually look at, like a electron microscope, a look at the energy system. They'll be able to, probably fairly soon. That would be my guess. The minute they are, medicine all of a sudden will believe in it, because it's seeable. It's like microbes that weren't believed in before we had the way to magnify them. So that will be there. And what happens with EFT is that when there is any distress, real distress, physical, emotional shock, the energy system, this nice flow, is disrupted. It's as though you put a boulder into a river and blocked it. And EFT unblocks the energy system so that the energy flows normally, and the trauma you can get rid of it finally. To bring something into your energy system and the energy field, to tap on it, you simply imagine it as vividly as you can. You want to create an image of it in your mind. You want to imagine feeling it, being there. It's not very complicated. If it's something that's worrying you, you usually can imagine it pretty quickly. So that's it. The whole process is really a very simple one. the only thing that I advise people when they're first learning EFT is be sure that you know a little bit about it, about the aspects, and a little bit about how to apply it, because there are more than one thing to be tapped at, more than one aspect, more than one factor that you'll want to address in any particular problem, usually. Some problems are so simple they've just got one. But if you have different aspects, if you were in an accident, a person was, different aspects might be the sound of the crash, the crash of the glass shattering might be an aspect. You might tap down other things that they remembered about the aspect, you might tap down other things that they remember about the accident, get them to feel much calmer about those things. But it won't be cleared out of the system until all the details that are still traumatic to them are tapped on and brought each one down. So that the whole principle, so the whole principle of aspects is important to know. And I always teach it, Gary Craig always teaches it, and we always point that out. Once you know that, you can be a detective and find out what are the different aspects of your situation and how do you bring them down one by one. Well, some of the general cues that they can ask themselves is, what else happened at that time? If, say, it's a traumatic experience, often is. What details do I remember that upset me? If it was a person you were afraid of, an attack you had as childhood, say there was a bully attacking you, what details do you remember? And make it in your mind like a movie. And run that movie in your mind and see, as you run it in your mind, see which details make you just sort of shiver and tighten up inside. You'll know. And you can jot it down if you want to on a piece of paper. You can just remember it and then say to yourself, even though they chased me and I thought I would fall and be killed, I choose to know that I survived perfectly and I'm well and healthy today. Or I choose to know that I'm safe today, or I deeply and completely accept myself, whatever the phrase is that they want to use. But run the movie in your mind, see the details, tap them down. EFT helps alleviate stress by getting rid of the disruption in the energy system and letting the energy flow. And what happens is that it's as if you were running a tape through a demagnetizing circuit. You're running the situation in your mind, the memory of it, or the anticipatory fear you're running through your mind. And as you do that, you are tapping and contacting the energy system and clearing the blockages so that you actually, in a sense, you demagnetize. You take the charge off it. And you remember it, but you don't feel the same way about it. It allows grief to do the healing it is intended by nature to do. And it is, it's incredibly soothing. I would recommend it so highly. And I've worked with people who had grief for family members or close people that they'd lost in accidents. And of course that's coupled with shock. That's coupled with the pain of thinking of the person being hurt. And there are a number of aspects to deal with. But the upshot of it is, if it is successfully done, they feel so close to that person. They feel them close with them, around them. It's very, very wonderful. The difference between an emotion and a thought, an emotion is a physiological changes in the body. emotion is many, many, many kinds of substances released in the bloodstream. Uh, Thought is, it's related because thought sets off emotion. So they're not completely separate. There are many thoughts that cause tremendous emotion in us. But emotion is feeling, and it is physiological, and that's why it has great effects on our health and our physical state. The law of attraction, which is fascinating, and I want to comment on the use of EFT for it. The law of attraction says very simply that like attracts like, that a vibration is set up in you, the person, that is going to attract a like vibration. And it is very much misunderstood. People think you've got to think positively to attract positive. It's not thinking. It is vibrating positively that they're talking about. They are simply pointing out what is the law of attraction is said to be a universal law, that as you vibrate, as you send out signals of a certain type into the universe, so you attract back similarities to that signal. Therefore, if you want to be happy, if you want to feel contented, if you want abundance, you must be sending out a vibration of abundance, of happiness. Now, EFT can do amazing things to change our vibration. Not only by getting rid of the blocks, which we've been talking about, and, which is amazing, but by simply certain exercises. I'm particularly interested in this. I've just written about it in a book, in fact, where you can do EFT exercises to bring a feeling of appreciation for yourself, for example, a kind of love of yourself, a genuine love, or appreciation for other people, or appreciation for life, or a sense of sort of a deep joy. And you can bring that from EFT. In other words, you can install the positive. It isn't just that you get rid of the negative. Tremendously important step. And then you have a whole other kind of understanding of the law of attraction. One way to install a positive is to think of something absolutely lovely that happened recently that you remember clearly. Say, just a moment of beauty, a moment that was so right. And as you think of it, just gently tap and say, that moment, that moment, that moment when I looked at that tree, that moment when I saw that reflections, that moment. And you just say some little words that bring it to your mind. And by tapping on it, you are tapping in the positive. It's very interesting. The very same method that gets rid of the negative can tap in and let it become part of you. So many nice things happen and they flitter away. We never think of them. But if we repeat the words that will bring it back and then tap them in, we change our whole feeling about our day. We just change it. So that's just one way you can tap in the positive. Even though I find it hard to have gratitude for that bad thing that happened, I choose to find a way to see the good in it and really feel it. If you say, that's a very good choice. I choose to find a way to feel the good in it and appreciate it. And you would tap on, I choose to feel a way to find the good. I choose to feel a way to find the good. I choose to see the good and use it. I choose to see the good and use it. There are all kinds. If you let yourself sort of think, your imagination, you'll come across the phrases that would really work for the gratitude. But there's some marvelous exercises that you can use, and I bet that more and more we'll be knowing and working out ways in which EFT is used to increase gratitude, to increase the good in life, just the good feelings. People can get stuck with using the law of attraction because they think that they must change their thoughts from negative to positive. You can't just change your thoughts. You have to coax your thoughts. You have to use, you can use EFT to change your whole, as I call it, vibration, your whole mood, your whole feeling. That is what counts, the feeling change, not the words. So whether you use positive or negative words, if you are feeling wonderful, that's what's going to bring what you want to you. It has to become real to you first. It has to somehow, you have to see and feel yourself in that situation. There is where you need the EFT. I find that the Abraham's work goes absolutely beautifully with EFT. It is the, it facilitates it so. It moves people to change what they call the vibrational level in such a genuine way. I mean, it's not just lip service at all. See, lip service isn't going to do it. And Abraham is the first to say that, the first to say that you have to have the feelings. The feelings are important. All right, how do you get the feelings? That's the whole trick. You get the feelings by tapping in the positive, by getting the negative out of the way and tapping in the positive. It's a beautiful tool to facilitate the law of attraction. It's a natural. It's a great misunderstanding to push everything, try to push everything to the side, because what you fight against gets stronger. It doesn't get weaker. What you resist persists, as the old saying goes. So when you are fighting against negatives, you're strengthening them, you're thinking of them, and by thinking of them, you're strengthening them. So it's a vicious circle there. You can break that circle with EFT. An example of somebody resisting a thought is that they may have a fear that, say, somebody that they know is not going to accept their invitation. Say they're going to call somebody and they want to go out with them and see them and be liked and cared about, and they have a fear they're not going to be. So they try to put that fear out of their mind. They push it away. They try to push it away. The minute they try to push it away, it is going to come back twice as strong. It's the old thing of don't think of a white elephant. What happens? You think of a white elephant. You're really giving yourself an unconscious command to think of it, because the subconscious does not know the word don't, doesn't understand it. So when you say to yourself, don't think that this person isn't going to love to go out with me, when you say don't, the subconscious doesn't hear don't, and you're telling yourself, think that, and you make yourself think it. It's not very well understood how you can attract the wrong thing by trying not to think it. That's just not that is not what Abraham intended or conveys. That is not what the secret was trying to say. That is simply a misunderstanding. Just doesn't work. EFT and weight loss is a very important use of it. It is so much of overweight and overeating is because of emotional issues driving people. They have no idea. They can be, for example, anger. Tremendous amount of overeating is due to trying to control anger, stuff it down, or bite into something to express the anger. It's anger that isn't expressed. But many other emotions that are not expressed are taken, many emotions are quieted through food. And the food is used so quickly to stop the emotion, you hardly know you have the emotion. You just grab for the food instead. So that the best way to use EFT with food cravings, people learn to tap for the emotion underneath the craving to eat. It is the way to go. It is absolutely important. And we work with people all the time with food cravings and other cravings by getting at the underlying emotion and calming it and curing it by the EFT. Well, EFT stems from TFT, which originally was created because of a phobia, the phobia of water. And it is state of the art for phobias. I'm a clinical psychologist, so I worked for many years with phobias. And I cannot tell you, it's a different world since we've had EFT. Now I can go with a phobia and work with it, and the person may very often, very quickly get rid of a phobia. If it's a simple phobia, you can do it in less than an hour. You could do it maybe in 20 minutes. To get rid of lifelong phobia, it's unbelievable. Sometimes this takes longer if it has a lot of aspects to the phobia. But it is the best method known today, anywheres, for phobias. There's nothing as quick or as lasting. Really lasts. The first phobia I ever used it on was almost 20 years ago when I started using the tapping techniques. It was a plain phobia. The woman got over it so completely that today she travels all around the world in her work. And I've checked on her recently, it was about 4 or 5 months ago. 20 years later, it still holds. I mean, we got the aspects and it still holds. Phobias are so deeply embedded and they are so automatic that the person can't help it. They know, almost always they know it's irrational. They'll say, this snake is a little garter snake. What am I getting so excited about? Or they know the logic. They've been told it 1,000 times. So it isn't a logical thing. And it isn't just being used, that's called exposure, where you see the thing over and over again. We have experimented, and there's some very good studies done that show that let's see, there's some, let me start back over that again. There's some very interesting studies done where you see that just exposing the person to the idea or letting them see the snake or whatever it is doesn't do what EFT does. It just doesn't do it. It can make them more anxious. But any good research study, I've been a researcher for years, among other things, and any good researcher has to control for that. They have to have people exposed to the thing over and over again, see if it does as good as EFT. It doesn't. What we've seen is amazing, that some other ingredient is there, and that involves the energy system. Sure. You might wonder, how much is it the tapping and how much is it talk therapy? Dr. Harvey Baker at Queens College, professor, has just finished a beautiful study where they did compare. They took people who had fears of certain small animals, rats, cockroaches, and those things. And they gave them, they divided the group, and half of the group received EFT treatment for it, and half of the group simply had talk therapy. They had an interview where they were allowed to talk about their fear and express all their fears. And this is the proper way to do it. It's the only way you can compare. And when he compared, the EFT group did significantly better, much better than just the interview. They did like the interview, but they didn't get over the fear of the animal. And the way they tested them was they had them walk up close to the cage of that animal afterwards. and they had, those who had just had the interview, they just couldn't do it. They could not make themselves walk near that animal. Whereas the EFT group, it was remarkable. And of course it's held up. I think their study, they tested them again 1 and a year and 4 months later. And after one session of EFT for this animal fear, rats and so forth, they still, the good effects still held up. That's really amazing. Oh, there's some other studies that are quite wonderful. There have been studies of EFT used for accident victims. They studied all the post-traumatic stress in these accident victims, and then gave them, measured it also with brainwaves too, with the EEG, as well as they measured it with paper and pencil tests and interviews and so forth. And then they had two sessions. I'll do that again. Then they had 2 sessions of EFT. Each was less than an hour, and then they retested them. And so much of the post-traumatic stress had gone down, their brainwave patterns had changed, and this held up for over 6 months, that it held up, just those 2 sessions. So it's been tested in the laboratory for that, and we're getting really interesting studies done now. We're going to see a lot more of them. There's been a recent study that's just being completed in free throw in basketball, and it's so, in the team that used the EFT, they increased their score incredibly. It was just beautiful study. And other studies of athletic performance are showing really measurable results. It just does do it. You can compare them with a group that had everything else the same, except they didn't have the EFT. The weight of a diagnosis is terrifying. It's so detrimental to the person, and so frightening. And EFT can be used wonderfully and has been for that. EFT can also be used for some of the underlying causes of some diseases, on some of the precipitating causes. Cancer, for example, there's been a lot of studies that show that many, many people who come down with cancer have had a very serious loss, very devastating loss within the past 2 years. Either they lost somebody that was very important to them, or they lost a career, or some other important aspect of their life was taken away from them. And it can go down, EFT can, used usually with a practitioner using it in this kind of a very severe case. It would be somebody helping them to do this, but it could go to the underlying causes, to the loss itself. And by correcting that cause, you are actually affecting the course of the disease, as well as your reaction to it. PTSD is post-traumatic stress disorder, and it is a very insidious thing because people who experience it after a disaster or after a terrifying experience are apt to not know that they have it. They go kind of numb. So they don't know that they're suffering even. They just go kind of numb. And therefore, it's tricky to treat because they may not even go to a therapist or anything for it. You can treat post-traumatic stress disorder with EFT, and you can treat it very well. I do advise people there to have help with it because it's very hard to have the objectivity to do it for yourself. I would recommend that they watch someone doing EFT, if they can. I would recommend that if they're reading about it, that they read about a really intelligent, detailed advice about it. So they know how to find the aspects, and they know how to go step by step. It's not hard. It's just a matter of doing it thoroughly. I would not, I guess this is negative advice, but I would not take somebody else's just casual statement, oh, you just tap on a few spots. That's not really, it's a little more than that. And it should be looked upon as a little more complex, but not very. The main steps is know what the problem is and state it. It's very simple to state it. It's what you are feeling that's painful and distressing and you don't like. The problem is that I have, well, somebody could say I don't have enough money to meet my bills this month. That's a very clear problem. If they want to tap on the anxiety about that, they then say, even though, they make an even though statement, and then they make the rest of the statement as the answer to the even though, the opposite of what they don't like. Even though I'm having trouble meeting my bills this month, I choose to find a very useful solution that I hadn't thought of, or whatever they want to say. They want to first state the problem, then state the solution, put them together into a sentence, and then start tapping on the tapping spots. They would tap with what we call a reminder phrase, and they go first around with the negative. I don't have enough money to pay my bills this month. Don't have enough money. Don't have enough money this month. Don't have. And then they would go around with one of the positive statements. They could say, I deeply and completely accept myself. I deeply and completely accept myself. Or they could say, I choose to find a very useful way to meeting those bills this month. I choose to find a very useful way of solving this problem. And they could go around with that. So they go around with the negative, then they go around with the positive, and then they have some way of measuring how distressed they feel. We usually suggest that they think of it on a 10-point scale of distress. When somebody is not getting success with EFT, it's often what they call the energy toxins. It's a kind of an allergic response that really gets in the way of the effectiveness of EFT, or the fact that there are many, and this is very often, many aspects of the situation that they have not addressed yet, or some aspects. People need to know how to trace the aspects, how to look at the details that they might have missed. There's maybe something in there that's upsetting them, but they have no idea what it is. I think looking for aspects is the most important thing they can do if they're not responding. The future of EFT is almost the future of the human race in some ways, because it's got to do with the human energy revolution, which is coming. When people understand what a role the energy system plays in our lives and how handling it can change our lives. So the future, I have talked some about it, the future is going to be in medicine, tremendous change in the way medicine is delivered. When we know about, and people recognize, and doctors and researchers know about the energy system. It's going to be a tremendous change in education. It's going to be a change in the way people handle children and bring up children. It's going to be a change, it's going to make a great change in the way relationships are handled. Anger and unpleasant emotions that hurt relationships can be nipped in the bud. I mean, they can be handled right away with the EFT. It's going to make, I think, a great deal of change in people's general way of handling life, and it'll make a change in what you could call the spiritual level, in the human spirit. It has the potential of a wonderful helpfulness, and it has the potential of bringing out the helpfulness that is there in people towards each other. One of the greatest things about EFT is that people use it for each other. I took a survey recently on my website about the uses of EFT. I have a survey method on that website. And a lot of 625 people took the survey. And almost as people use EFT almost as often for other people as they do for themselves. They just love it because you can reach out to help your family, your friends, your whoever that you know. And we all want to do that, and yet we're kind of awkward a lot of the time. We just don't know what to do. But if you have this, you've got a gift for others. So it's going to bring out, I think, a very loving spirit in people. And I think it will bring out a sense of oneness and a sense of, it'll bring many, I can't say it, I'm saying how to say it. It's going to deepen a spiritual sense in the sense of love and appreciation and humanity. Just, and peace. I think it's going to be a source of genuine peace in the world. Peace within, and therefore peace, it would be peace within and therefore peace without. It has tremendous promise. Stress has a tremendous impact on the body immediately. It's impacting the emotions, and the emotions are driving all the systems of our body, keeping them regulated or dysregulated. When you hit the system with a distressing emotion and stress, you are throwing a monkey wrench into the whole system. It's just not functioning right. And of course, we now know it's not functioning because the energy system is thrown off very badly. So it's known in medicine, of course, today, that a huge percentage, some people say 80%, of medical illness is stress-related. We know, we can sense in our own bodies when we are under stress what the physical manifestation is right there. We know it immediately, instinctively, and of course we have a lot of research on it. So it's not good for our health, it's not good for our well-being to have stress unrelieved. You want to relieve it. Wonderful to be able to, right on the spot, to nip it in the bud and fix the growing. It's wonderful to be able to stop something that is starting, and if you can stop it right away, it'll never grow and fester and grow into a major problem. And that's where it's so great to have something like EFT that we all have right there at any time. But we can get stuck in worries. We can get stuck in repetitive thoughts. We can be thinking the same thing, and the more we think it, the more worried we get, and the more worried we get, the more we think it. So it's a vicious circle. EFT can break that vicious circle just like that. I mean, it has the power to do that. You tap on this thing, you bring it down immediately. If you're somewhere where you can't tap, you can imagine it in your mind, and it's amazingly effective. If you're somewhere where you're like at a board meeting and you're upset, your hands under the table can tap the karate chop spot. There's all kinds of ways you can do it without being conspicuous. And it stops it right there.